As dads, some days we feel like we have all the answers, and some days we feel like we don't have a clue. If that describes you, you're at the right place. This is the All Pro Dad Podcast. I'm your host, Ted Lowe, and each week on the All Pro Dad Podcast, we ask just one question. We explore the answer, talk about what we've gotten wrong, and occasionally what we've gotten right, and talk about what the experts say. And then at the end of every episode, give you just one simple but powerful pro move of the week. Today, I am joined with two other dads, Mr. Bobby Lewis, Mr. Jason Hood. Glad to have you guys.
Yep, thanks for having us.
So glad you guys are here. And the question of the week, we're just going to dive in, is when should my kids be my top priority? When should my kids be my top priority? We've all been there, right?
I wonder, this is kind of a hot button question, and I know it is with parents, both moms and dads. I think from a philosophical standpoint, I think the three of us at this table would agree your kids should not overall be your top priority.
Right.
At least for me in my life, God's my number one priority. My wife would be my second priority, and the kids would be not a distant third, but they would be third. And I do think that that's an important distinction to make. We're not necessarily tackling this question today from, are the kids the most important thing in the world for you? I would say from a healthy life perspective, they shouldn't be your number one thing in your world, but we want to do this well. We want to be good dads. We want to care for our children and our families. So there are times when they should be our top priority, but overall, not our number one in all of life.
Gotcha. When has that been a challenge for you guys where you feel like, I feel torn between different priorities?
Well, if you have young kids, you know that they suck up a lot of the priority. I mean, just naturally, they need a lot more attention than my wife does. I mean, she's a fully functional adult, whereas the kids are still learning and growing and trying to figure things out. So they actually require a lot more attention. It's the balance of how do I balance the attention that I'm giving them as I'm raising them and teaching them things versus just worrying about what they're doing all the time.
Yeah, my daughter came out of her bedroom yesterday for church with a dress on backwards. So they need a My wife did not do that. She came with her dress on forward, which was great. So,
well, and I think there's the tension of what does it mean that they're your priority? You go to work. Well, I'm going to work because you are my priority because we like to live indoors and have food. And so I think there's that tension of what does it look like for them to be your priority? Bobby, you wrote an article that we're basing this podcast off of on allprodad.com, shameless plug.
Shameless. Yeah.
You're going to find so many good tips and resources.
Subscribe today.
It'll be in your show notes.
Yes, it will actually.
It always is. It was entitled The 4 Times You Should Drop Everything for Your Kids.
Yeah. And it was actually an article I didn't think was going to be nearly as popular as it was. And I'm thankful that it is because there are times we got to drop everything. And it came from an instance where I was working in the garage. I like to do some woodworking. So I was out there and I was using the saw, power saw is really loud. I got like ear protection on and stuff. And yet even above all of that, I heard this like crazy, terrifying screaming sound in my house. And I was like, that sounds bad. Let me take the headphones off, turn the saw off. And I walked in my son's face was bloody. His chin was like, I'm not going to get super graphic with it, but it was really bad. And I was like, what in the world happened? And my daughter's sitting on the bed and she goes, he fell. She was not concerned at all. Apparently they were like jumping on the bed and he slipped. And when he came down, he hit his chin flush on the floor and it split his chin open. We had to take him to the doctor and it was rough. But it actually triggered this idea in my head is like, man, what if I'd been like, you're fine. Just go wipe it off.
I got some wood to cut.
Yeah, I got to cut some wood in the ground. I'm working on a birdhouse for you or whatever I was working on. I think we were doing birdhouses at the time, but I had to stop what I was doing and prioritize my son because he needed me so much in that moment. He was incapable of taking care of himself. And that's what birthed this article. And I'm really glad we wrote it. And a lot of dads have enjoyed reading it over the years. So I hope we can have a good conversation about it.
Right. And again, we're feeling the tension of when those are those obvious moments. You're going, of course I'm stopping everything. And then there's the less.
Oh, when they get hurt, that's kind of an obvious one. But there's other ones.
But still, it's great to think through, like, when does that happen? When are those other times that maybe are not so obvious?
And I think the cool part about the 4 we're going to talk about today are they may not be like our natural inclination as dads. It may not be our first reaction to be like, oh, dad needs to be the one to step in for this. But I think that'll come into play.
So what's the first one?
First one is after a breakup. And if you're a dad who doesn't have kids who are dating, don't necessarily think of the word breakup just as relationship when they're 17, 18 years old, they're dating someone, whatever. This could be like a breakup when they're in 3rd grade and their best friend doesn't want to be friends anymore. Some kind of a breakup where a relationship is severed. How did dad step into that moment?
Well, I am in that boat. I have an 8-year-old and a 13-year-old, and if anybody breaks up with them, we're going to be fighting somebody. I haven't had a lot of experience with this. My son is still in that age where everybody's his best friend. Anybody that plays with him, the last person that played with him is his best friend. And my daughter thinks boys are dumb.
That's
so
really
I'm
good.
like,
keep thinking they're
love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
So they have not proven her wrong yet. So I'm trying to temper that between, okay, are boys dumb? Are they immature? I'm really scared to have these types of conversations with her because I don't want her to always become this, boys are just ridiculous, because eventually she's going to like one and she's not going to know what to do.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So I am kind of in this middle phase with this one in particular that I haven't had a lot of experience with it, but man, I'm kind of on the cusp of it with my 13-year-old, and I'm a little. If I'm being honest, I'm kind of dreading it.
Well, someday that day will come for you. It will come for me. My daughter's 13 as well. Like at some point, she'll have her heart broken. Yeah. Right. Yep. And if she's had these experiences with friends, and that's kind of given her a little bit of a look into that. But it's different when it's like a romantic type of relationship. Right. So that breakup's probably going to be even worse. Have you dealt with that with some of your older kids?
Yes. Yes, we have. Well, the boys,
I see your eyes starting to twitch.
The boys are like, they're just different about it. Like they'll just inform me. It's like, like it's a grade from school, or like I've got football practice this afternoon. It's like, yeah, where's so-and-so? Well, we broke up. Well, what happened? And then they go off to do the next thing. So it's very stereotypical, and I'm sure not every guy it's like that. But my daughter is more like when she's upset about things. Again, we talk about it on here all the time. Being there for her and dropping my agenda to fix the situation. But I think it's just being there. I'm so sorry. It sounds so hard, but it's those things. It did relieve a lot of the pressure, though, that being there for her looked different.
Was that awkward for you as a dad?
Oh, I'm terrible at it. I want to fix it immediately for her. I'm seeing her hurting, and I want to, physically harm some poor young teenager. Like I'm going, this isn't okay. I should, but I do. There is that knee jerk. Don't you hurt my girl? Like even when my boys are would be a little bit.
That's funny as my father-in-law. I didn't meet him until my wife and I were dating in college, but she would tell stories about like he was the guy cleaning the shotgun, like in high school when like the girl would come over or the guy would come over to take his daughter out for a date. And he's like, I know people.
I want to be that dad,
totally
but then just
intimidating.
be like, I'm totally kidding, dude. Like,
scare him to death.
I know. He'd be like, I know your social security number already. And then the kid's like ghost white, and my wife now, she's like, Dad, stop it. He didn't do that with me. But man, I could kind of see him doing that. It's funny.
It feels like the biggest thing that I would say is, this is a cheesy line, but I heard it before, is puppy love is real to puppies.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say that because the emotions are real. And my wife was a high school swim coach for years and years and years. And I remember one day she came home and her eyes were like huge. She's like, I got to tell you this story. I got the crap scared out of me today because this high school swimmer on her team came up and she's just crying, this 15-year-old girl, whatever. And she looked at it and she says, Coach Jocelyn, my boyfriend and I did something terrible yesterday. And my wife's like, we're supposed to be swimming laps, And she's like, yeah, I can't believe it. I broke up with him. And she's like, oh my gosh. She's like, I thought this was going to be way worse than this. But this young girl, 15 years old, was just devastated. And my wife became like part swim coach, part counselor. Yeah. And it was kind of a natural instinct for her. If it was me, if I was the coach and a 15-year-old girl came to me or boy or whatever and said, oh, we broke up, I'd be like, Sorry.
And is there more to the story?
I would probably not have been as compassionate. Yeah.
Kudos to her for being able to see the crying through the water of the swimming too.
Yeah. Well, the goggles were filling up. No, I'm just kidding. But I mean, I want to be better at this. My wife's naturally good at this, and I don't know if that's the difference between men and women. But for me as a dad, like I don't really look forward to those conversations. Like it's kind of awkward. Like you said, you were bad at this. Like I want to be good at it, and I think it's hard. We're going to work our way through it. It's tricky.
It's good.
Yeah, it's being strong and just saying, I'm so sorry, but being steady yourself. What about the second one?
Yeah. The next thing I want to hit on, and this is going to come into play for every kid at every stage, is when they fail. They're going to fail. So how do we prioritize our kids when they have fallen short of it, whether it was a goal or if they've made a mistake? When they fail, how do we prioritize them?
Well, I'm dealing with this in two different ways in my house right now. My daughter is extremely competitive and feels like she should do everything really, really well, even the first few times she tries it. And she'll even get emotional sometimes and start to get physically, she'll get mad to the point where she starts to be upset and crying. I mean, this literally happened on the wiffle ball field last night when we were playing wiffle ball as a 13-year-old versus 8-year-old, and my son's coming back, like she's been whipping him the whole game, and she's up 6-1, and then he scores 5 runs in 1 inning, and then her next at bat, she's losing it because she's struck out because she's letting it get in her head. But with my son, if he feels like, so she's super competitive in that way, and so dealing with those type of emotions. But then my son is like, he wants to, if it starts to get hard, he's the opposite. He's just like, all right, I'm gonna go do something else when it starts to get hard. And so we're trying to learn in one case that, hey, I like that you're competitive. I think that's a good thing, but letting those emotions overtake you to the point where you can't even function without being upset. That's a bit too far.
Did you talk to her in the moment?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. I did. I was like, hey, we're out here. This is supposed to be fun. I want you to have fun. Yeah. And that's all I said. I left it at that. Then I walked back, all-time pitcher, pitch in the bat. And I have a tendency to make jokes in these types of situations. I don't know if that's always a good thing, but I do. I can lighten the mood a little bit. With my son, I want him to keep trying. And so it's a little bit harder with him because he's like, hands up, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. And I'm trying to get re-engaged, where she's like overly engaged. He is the opposite, and he's like, I'm not.
How do you encourage him when he's like, because he's not emotional about it. He's just like, I'm just not going to do it anymore.
Yeah. He just well, I try to tell him that we always have this phrase in our house: hard things make you better. And if you want to get better, and I always ask him, I was like, do you want to be good at this? Okay, there's a difference between wanting to be good at something and being willing to do what it takes to be good at it.
That's good.
And so that's what I always explain to him. And I always ask him that every time. And he always says yes, but then it's like, I'm still not willing to do what it takes to be good at it. We're trying to learn push-ups right now for him. And I'm trying to help him understand, like, if you want to get better at push-ups, you have to do them every day.
Yeah, and I think we also should convey to children that failure is not always a terrible thing.
Right.
Because then they're going to, whenever failure does creep up, and it will, they're absolutely going to fail at certain things. They're not going to necessarily view it as totally a bad thing because, we had a situation at our house where my 4-year-old, she wanted to do ballet. I'm like, perfect. We'll get the little. Really, we found out later on she just wanted the tutu, and we paid all that money for nothing. But she wanted to do the ballet, and we went to the recital. My daughter stood in the corner and watched, and all the other kids were dancing. But there was one little girl who she was running across, and you're supposed to jump over the hula hoop or whatever they're supposed to do, and she slipped and she fell. She was the only one, and like. Nobody booed, nobody was upset. They like helped her up and she did it again and she got it right. And it was okay. Like, oh, you fell. You didn't do what you were trying to do, but it's okay. We gave you another shot. You did it. Yeah. Failure wasn't the end. I think being a perfectionist, and I'm a perfectionist in some ways, like that can work against you in some ways. You have to be okay with failure. I read an article that said Einstein was like a huge fan of failure. And some of the research in that article said, the average person, if they can get to a point where they fail 1 out of 5 times, they're actually going to get better at whatever they're trying to do, because you're learning what doesn't work. And so I don't want kids to be, or my kids certainly don't want them to be afraid of failing.
Right.
I think failing makes you grow.
Yeah, that's exactly what we say at our house too. It's like failure is a part of the learning process. You learn doing things. You learn what not to do. You learn what works and what doesn't work. And if you apply those lessons, you're going to get better. Yeah. When you fail, you start learning. And that's the process that we're trying to get better.
That's a great message for dads to say to their kids. I think people are listening right now and going, ooh, that's a good like aha moment. Say, hey, you're going to fail, buddy. Just go, ooh, that's great. Love that.
And be there when they do.
Yeah.
And be there when they do.
Let them know it's okay.
That's good. What's the next one?
Third one is when they're sick. And I am super guilty of this. I don't know if you guys ever get the man flu, which is kind of like a mild cold, but like I'm done for days. Like I'm dying, I've got the sniffles. Like I'm the weakest, man, when I get the cold, but my kids are kind of the same way. And normally it's mom who steps in and takes care of it. And I realized that. I was like, man, my son, my daughter, whoever it is, they've got a cold. They're not feeling well. Even if they do have like the actual flu, like they don't feel well. And it's almost as a default in my house that my wife jumps to action. And when I realized that, I felt bad about myself. I was like, man, why am I leaving this for my wife to do? Like she's a nurturing person and she's a caring person, but I don't want my kids to feel like only mom cares that you're sick. Only mom cares about you getting well again. And I don't know if they feel that way or not. Maybe they do. I haven't asked them, but I know that I haven't done a lot of the work when they get sick for sure.
Right. Yeah, I think that's probably the case in our house too. I'm the same way. I'm a big baby when it comes to being sick. If I'm sick and I'm tired and I'm exhausted, but I secretly I'm like, will you just take care of me? Please take care of me.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think dads can bring a level of strength that's settling for a kid when they're sick. I remember very specifically going to the pediatrician, and for some reason my dad came with us. I have no idea why. He had never been there before, but they were going to give me a shot, and I wanted him. I didn't want my mom, who probably would cry with me about it. I wanted the strength of my dad. And we volunteer for an organization in the summer called Lighthouse Retreat, and they work with families who are dealing with childhood cancer. And I watch these dads step up during those times, and they're the strength. Not that women are not strong. Do not hear me saying that, but there is something about a dad joining in on that to go, hey, I'm solid. I'm strong with you. I'm probably, one dad was telling me, he goes, whatever he wanted to eat, I would just leave and go get it, or I would call Grubhub or whatever. His mom was like, you're spending too much money. He's like, hey, if he'll eat, I'm there. Yeah. So it's just those moments where you can step up.
So BJ Foster is one of the writers here at All Pro Dad, and he's been on the podcast before. He told a really cool story about having to choose between his sick kid and a job interview. And he had an interview with a very important, this is like a second or third interview. It was a really big one where he was trying to get a job, and it was important, like a last chance sort of situation. And he told me the story about how right before he was supposed to go do this meeting, his son called and he's like deathly sick. He's like super, high fever, throwing up, the whole thing. And he's like, Dad, I need you to come home. And BJ's like, if I don't go to this meeting, I'm definitely not getting this job. If I go home, you'll know I care about you more than this job. And it was like this tension. He's like, what am I going to do? And he left and he went home and he spent the time with his son. And, it was a really interesting story, because when we spend time with our kids when they're sick, we teach them a lot of things. We teach them, for one, like, your well-being matters to me. Two, like, I've prioritized you over other things that I could be doing right now. And three, like, you matter to me more than anything else in this world, and you need to know that. It's not the same thing as just saying, like, here's some Tylenol, you'll be better in a couple hours. I'm going back to the garage to cut the wood, or whatever you were doing. It is, I care enough about you to sit in this moment with you and struggle with you. Yeah. You're not going to do it on your own. And that sounds great, and it worked for BJ, but obviously that's like an ideal situation. What if BJ's interview was in like Seattle and his son lives in Georgia? Like, you're not going to stop and turn around and be there any minute. Like, some dads travel for work, and I know you've been dealing with that lately. Like, sometimes you just physically can't stop everything, but you need to show them that you prioritize them in another way besides just physically being there.
Right. Yep. As we're recording, my oldest is having nose surgery. He's not vain. He got it broken during a softball game, which there's something weird about me as a dad going, "Dad, a boy." I don't know what that's about. I'm glad that's why you're getting your nose fixed. But, I had to be here. His mom's going to be with him, but I had to decide. But one of the things I've been trying to do is just keep up with what's going on. I told his mom, I said, we're going to be recording, but it's on do not disturb, but anybody but you. And so I just think there's those moments we've got to pick ways just that we're thinking about them, that we're still available, and they can get those. Oh, you're thinking about me right now also speaks priority.
Absolutely.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, we were recording stuff and you're checking your phone to make sure your son's okay in the middle of recording stuff. That's an amazing dad thing to do. Whether your son knows it or not, like he's going to wake up after surgery and be like, I got 9 texts from dad. Whew, good. Yeah. He was thinking about me. Yeah. Huge deal.
Well, I think it's important to acknowledge too, I heard Pastor would say this, he goes, one day you're going to be irrelevant at work, but you're never going to be irrelevant at home.
Absolutely.
And I think about how many jobs that we leave, that we've gone to the next thing. There's nobody calling from that last job. No bad heart. It just doesn't work that way, that they got the best of us and our kids got what was left of us. And so I think it's just those things to remember going, hey, at the end of the day, these people are the ones that matter the most, even when it's tough calls.
Yeah. Drop everything when they're sick. They need to know you care about them, for sure. And the last one I want to talk about, and I think this one is maybe the most important one that we have to wrestle with as dads, is you need to drop everything and prioritize your kid when they get in with the wrong crowd. And this can be tricky because you may not always know what's happening. You may not realize that they're getting in with the wrong crowd. And then once it becomes apparent, you're like, "Ooh, man, like, how do I deal with this?" We know that old phrase, we've heard it over and over again, bad company corrupts good character. And I don't want my kids to be corrupted in any way.
Yeah. Again, I haven't experienced this yet with my daughter or my son, but I remember when I was going through this in 8th grade, I had moved from living with my dad to now living with my mom. I had never been a popular kid in middle school or elementary school. I was kind of middle of the road at best. But then I came to this new school in this new town, and all of a sudden I was popular. I don't know if it was the new kid effect or what it was, but that it lended me more attention than I'd ever had before. And I just remember that carried over from 8th grade into high school. And the couple of the people that I was running with weren't making great choices, quite frankly. And I lived with my mom at this time. My dad was still about an hour away, but I do remember I was at this point I was playing sports, but I also played the drums, and so I was on the drum corps, and 2 of my friends were also in the drum corps. Well, they decided to quit, and so I was like, well, I'm going to quit too, and my parents wouldn't let me, and my mom was like, nope, you've already committed to it, you're going to do it. And what I think they knew, and my dad even stepped in, which didn't happen a ton. In this decision, in this stage, I was going to quit. And both of them came together and unified and was like, no, you're not going to quit. And from that decision, I was able to make some really good friends that had a really good positive effect on me.
That's good. But they were aware of what's going on, and they realized that those kids were the reason you were quitting.
Right.
Like that.
Well, what stood out to me was that my mom and dad were unified in something, which didn't happen a ton. I mean, they were separated, and I don't know how much they were communicating at that time, but in that moment, they came together and they were unified, and they said, as a united front, we're telling you are not allowed to do this. They didn't tell me. I don't remember if they told me why, but what the consequences of that decision is those friends that I spent the most time with that weren't a part of what I was a part of now, all of that went away. I was spending more time with people that had better influence on my life.
Gotcha. And it was their awareness. So, Bobby, is that the deal with this? It's just you can't know if they're crowd if you don't know their crowd.
I mean, the younger the kid, the more easily influenced they're going to be. Yeah. And I was reading a statistic that said like 85% of high schoolers said they had experienced peer pressure at some point in their life. And that's a lot. That's a lot of kids. And so dads have to be aware of this, that there is such pressure on kids at every age, but as they get into those teen years, maybe even more, there's such pressure to conform into being someone that's liked or someone who is trying to be popular. Like you said, you had that popularity. Like there's so much pressure to just do whatever will get you more friends or, just have you move up that social ladder, whatever the case is, that you'll start making decisions that probably may not be the best for you. And so as dads, when we see that pattern start, got to step in and say, is this true to who you really are?
Yeah.
Is this who you want to be? Do you want to hang out with this group and be influenced in this direction? Or is there another group that may influence you in a more positive direction? Got to step in when we see those things. And it kind of manifests itself. If kids are isolating or if kids are changing wide swings in behavior change, like those are signs that your child is probably, getting in with a crowd that you need to address.
Yeah.
I love that. And just watching the subcultures too. I'd watch my kids go from cross country to theater and different things. And you go, whoa, I would watch their personalities shift a little bit. So I was like, you got to be aware of those subcultures, like what kind of environment is this going to create? Bobby, this is good stuff that we do to stop and drop and roll as a dad.
Shut them down.
Yeah. Shut it down.
Open up shop.
Just shut it down. Bobby, this is great stuff. So it's awareness with our kids and being available when they need us. I love this. Yeah. So what's our pro move of the episode?
Pro move of the week is look for opportunities to stop and tend to your kids' needs, because not prioritizing your kids properly can be very harmful to them.
Say it one more time. That's good.
Yeah. Look for opportunities to stop and tend to your kids' needs, because if we're not going to prioritize them at the right times, that can be very harmful.
That's good. Good. Thanks, Bobby. And thanks for all you who are listening. We know you and your kids will be glad you did. Thanks for listening to the All Pro Dad podcast. All Pro Dad is the fatherhood program of the nonprofit Family First. Along with our motherhood program, iMom, we exist to help you love your family well. Subscribe to our daily email, the All Pro Dad Play of the Day, by going to allprodad.com/subscribe and get daily powerful and practical fatherhood tips in your inbox. The All Pro Dad podcast is hosted by me, Ted Lowe, produced by Bobby Lewis.